Anthony Ward? Are you serious? He's been at every town meeting for years.
That's what I said, but they got him. 25 years later, they finally got him.
How? There was never any evidence linking him to Laura.
Turns out there was. A piece of his shirt torn off and stuck under her car seat. Been sitting in that evidence box since 1998.
So while Sandra Bennett spent decades wondering if her daughter was alive,
He was right here, living among us, probably saw her at those vigils.
God, we all trusted him.
A single thread, smaller than your fingernail, hidden for 25 years beneath a car seat while a killer walked free. That thread just put Anthony Ward behind bars for murder. But here's the sick twist. This wasn't some sophisticated forensic breakthrough. This wasn't cutting-edge technology solving the unsolvable. This was a piece of evidence sitting in a cardboard box, forgotten and ignored, while Laura Bennett's family spent a quarter-century wondering if their daughter was dead or alive. The detective who found it almost threw it away. One more second of hesitation, and Anthony Ward would still be living under his fake name in Georgia, convinced he'd gotten away with the perfect crime. Laura Bennett was 19 years old when she vanished from Gainesville, Florida, on a humid summer night in 1998. Her last words to her mother, "I'll be home soon, Mom." She never made it home. Her case went cold faster than her coffee at the diner where she'd just finished her shift. But that scrap of fabric, that thread that almost ended up in a trash can, it's about to unravel the most shocking confession Florida has heard in decades. And when you hear what Anthony Ward did to Laura that night, you'll understand why some secrets should have stayed buried forever. Drop a comment right now. Do you think 25 years is too long to wait for justice? Because what happened next will change how you think about cold cases forever. It's 11:45 p.m. on July 23rd, 1998. The payphone outside Mel's diner rings once before Laura Bennett's mother picks up. "Mom, I'm just finishing up. I'll be home in 20 minutes, okay?" Those were the last words Sandra Bennett would ever hear from her daughter. Laura was everything you'd expect from a small-town Florida girl chasing big dreams. 19 years old, blonde hair always pulled back in a ponytail, working double shifts at Mel's diner to pay for her freshman year at the University of Florida. She had plans. She had a future. She had a mother waiting up for her every single night. But as the minutes ticked past midnight, Sandra Bennett knew something was wrong. Laura never broke her promises. She never stayed out without calling. She never left her mother wondering. By 1 a.m., Sandra was calling the diner. No answer. By 2 a.m., she was driving the route Laura would have taken home, her headlights cutting through the darkness, looking for any sign of that faded blue Toyota Corolla. Nothing. The next 48 hours were a parent's worst nightmare. Police told Sandra to wait, that Laura was probably just with friends. But Sandra knew better. She knew her daughter. And then they found the car. 2 days after Laura vanished, a jogger spotted something blue through the trees on Old Mill Road, a dirt path 20 miles outside Gainesville. The Toyota Corolla sat abandoned, keys missing, driver's door unlocked, but it was what they found inside that made investigators realize they weren't dealing with a runaway teenager. Laura's work apron was folded neatly on the passenger seat. Not thrown, not discarded. Folded. Like someone had taken the time to make everything look normal. Like someone wanted to buy themselves time before anyone started asking questions. The Gainesville Police Department launched their investigation immediately. They interviewed Laura's co-workers, her friends, anyone who might have seen her that night. They canvassed the area around Mel's diner, looking for witnesses, security footage, anything that could tell them what happened after Laura hung up that payphone. What they found was nothing. Absolutely nothing. No witnesses saw Laura leave the diner. No security cameras caught her walking to her car. No one remembered seeing a blue Toyota Corolla driving through town after midnight. It was as if Laura Bennett had simply vanished into thin air. The investigation consumed Gainesville. Flyers with Laura's smiling face appeared on every street corner, every store window, every telephone pole. Volunteers organized search parties, combing through miles of Florida wilderness. The local news ran her story every night for weeks. Sandra Bennett became the face of desperation. She held press conferences begging for information. She offered rewards she couldn't afford. She never stopped believing that somewhere out there her daughter was still alive, still fighting, still hoping someone would find her. But as weeks turned into months, the leads dried up. The volunteers stopped searching, the news stopped calling, and Laura Bennett became another cold case file in a dusty evidence room. If you think cases like Laura's deserve to be told, hit that subscribe button right now, because what you're about to hear next proves that sometimes the most important stories are the ones everyone forgot about. By December 1998, Laura Bennett's case had officially gone cold. The file was moved from active investigation to cold case storage, joining hundreds of other unsolved mysteries gathering dust in the Gainesville Police Department. But for Sandra Bennett, there was no such thing as cold. Every morning she woke up wondering if today would be the day she'd get answers. Every phone call made her heart race. Every knock at the door made her think maybe, just maybe, Laura had found her way home. The theories started almost immediately. In a small town like Gainesville, people need explanations. They need someone to blame. Some whispered that Laura had run away, that the pressure of college, of working double shifts, of trying to make everyone proud had finally broken her. They pointed to the folded apron as evidence. See, they said, she planned this. She wanted to disappear. Others believed she'd been abducted by a stranger, someone passing through town who saw a young woman alone and took his chance. They organized neighborhood watches, installed security lights, taught their daughters to never walk alone after dark. The most cruel theory was the one that blamed Laura herself. Why was she working so late? Why did she walk to her car alone? Why didn't she have someone escort her? As if being 19 and hard-working was somehow an invitation for violence. Sandra Bennett heard every whisper, every theory, every cruel suggestion that her daughter was somehow responsible for her own disappearance, and every single one felt like another knife in her heart. But she never stopped fighting. Every year on July 23rd, the anniversary of Laura's disappearance, Sandra organized vigils in the town square. She lit candles, she shared memories, she kept her daughter's name alive in a community that was slowly forgetting. She called the police station every month asking for updates, begging for someone to take another look at the evidence. Most of the time, the officers were polite but firm. There simply wasn't anything new to investigate. The original detective on the case, Jim Morrison, retired in 2003. The case file was passed to Detective Megan Rhodes, who reviewed it thoroughly but found no new leads. When Rhodes transferred to Miami in 2007, the file went to Detective Mike Rodriguez. Rodriguez to Detective Lisa Thompson. Thompson to Detective Kevin Walsh. Each detective brought fresh eyes to the case. Each one hoped to be the one who finally cracked it, but the evidence was what it was. A car, an apron, and absolutely no forensic traces of what had happened to Laura Bennett. The years crawled by. Laura would have graduated college in 2001. She would have turned 25 in 2004, 30 in 2009, 35 in 2014. Sandra marked each milestone with private grief and public determination. She created a Facebook page in 2008, Finding Laura Bennett. She shared photos, memories, updates on the investigation. The page gained followers, other families dealing with missing loved ones, true crime enthusiasts, people who believed that every case deserved attention. But followers don't solve murders. Shares don't bring closure. And as the years passed, even Sandra's most dedicated supporters began to lose hope. By 2020, 22 years after Laura's disappearance, the case had been reviewed by 6 different detectives. The evidence box had been moved 3 times as the police department reorganized their storage. The original crime scene photos had been digitized. The witness statements had been retranscribed. Everything had been looked at, analyzed, and filed away again. Everything except one tiny piece of evidence that nobody had bothered to examine closely. Because sometimes the most important clues are the ones hiding in plain sight, waiting for the right person to find them. And in 2023, that person finally walked into the evidence room with fresh eyes and a determination to leave no stone unturned. Detective Roland Webb didn't want the Laura Bennett case. When he transferred to the Gainesville Police Department's cold case unit in January 2023, he had his eye on more recent disappearances, cases where witnesses were still alive and evidence hadn't been sitting in storage for a quarter century. But his supervisor handed him the Bennett file with a simple instruction. Fresh eyes, Webb. See if you can spot something everyone else missed. Webb spent his first week reading through the case files. 25 years of investigation notes, witness statements, evidence logs, and dead-end leads. He studied crime scene photos until he had them memorized. He read Sandra Bennett's desperate pleas to previous detectives, her theories, her suggestions, her never-ending hope. And then he went to the evidence room. The Laura Bennett evidence box was exactly where it was supposed to be, shelf C47, between a 1997 armed robbery and a 1999 domestic violence case. The box was smaller than Webb expected, containing everything investigators had collected from Laura's abandoned Toyota Corolla. Webb methodically removed each item. The folded work apron, photographs of the car's interior and exterior, fingerprint cards that had yielded nothing useful, a few personal items from the glove compartment, registration papers, a pack of gum, some loose change. He was about to close the box when something caught his eye. At the very bottom, underneath layers of evidence bags and documentation, was a small plastic bag labeled simply fabric, unknown origin, car interior. Webb held the bag up to the light. Inside was a small scrap of cloth, maybe 1/2 inch wide and 2 inches long. The evidence tag indicated it had been found wedged deep beneath the driver's seat during the car's initial processing. The original investigators had photographed it, bagged it, and filed it away, but the technology of 1998 couldn't tell them much about a piece of fabric. No DNA testing, no advanced fiber analysis, just a notation that it didn't match Laura's clothing from that night. Webb stared at the scrap of cloth. 25 years later, that unknown origin fabric could tell a very different story. He immediately sent the evidence to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement's crime lab with a rush request for DNA analysis. Modern testing could extract genetic material from samples that would have been useless in 1998. 3 weeks later, the results came back. Male DNA. Unknown subject. Enough genetic material for a full profile and database comparison. Webb ran the profile through CODIS, the national DNA database. No match in the federal system. But Florida had been aggressive about collecting DNA from offenders, including retroactive collection from cases dating back decades. The state database hit immediately. Anthony Michael Ward, born 1971, last known address, Gainesville, Florida. Arrested multiple times between 1995 and 2001 for assault, domestic violence, and stalking. DNA collected during a 2019 arrest for public intoxication in Valdosta, Georgia. Webb stared at the results on his computer screen. In 1998, Anthony Ward had lived at 1247 Pine Street, exactly 2.3 miles from Mel's Diner. The same Anthony Ward, who had been questioned briefly during the original investigation and released when nothing connected him to Laura. The same Anthony Ward who had apparently moved to Georgia sometime in the early 2000s and was now living under the name Anthony Mitchell. The same Anthony Ward whose DNA was now definitively linked to the inside of Laura Bennett's car. How could a single piece of evidence, overlooked for 25 years, suddenly solve one of Gainesville's most notorious cold cases? The answer was about to shatter everything the community thought they knew about Laura's disappearance. If stories like Laura's matter to you, if you believe that no case should ever be forgotten, hit subscribe right now. Because what Detective Webb discovered next will change everything you think you know about this case. Detective Webb knew he had one shot to get this right. After 25 years, Anthony Ward thought he was untouchable. He'd watched the Laura Bennett case fade from the news, seen the search parties give up, witnessed a community move on from a tragedy they couldn't solve. He'd even changed his name to Anthony Mitchell, started a new life in Valdosta, Georgia, working construction and keeping his head down. In his mind, he'd committed the perfect crime. But DNA doesn't lie, and DNA doesn't forget. Webb spent 2 months building an airtight case. He traced Ward's movements in 1998, confirmed his employment records, located witnesses who remembered seeing him around Mel's diner during Laura's shifts. He coordinated with Georgia law enforcement to establish surveillance and plan the arrest. On March 15, 2023, Anthony Ward was taken into custody at his apartment in Valdosta. He was 62 years old, living alone, working odd jobs under his assumed name. When officers knocked on his door, he answered calmly, as if he'd been expecting them. The extradition to Florida took 3 days. Ward said nothing during transport, nothing during booking, nothing during his first night in the Alachua County Jail. Detective Webb had handled enough confessions to know that silence was often a suspect's last line of defense. But he also knew that 25 years of carrying a secret could break down even the most hardened criminals. The interrogation room was small and windowless, furnished with a metal table and 2 chairs. Webb placed a manila folder in front of Ward, but didn't open it immediately. "Anthony, you know why you're here?" Ward stared straight ahead. No response. "You know we found your DNA in Laura Bennett's car?" Still nothing. Webb opened the folder and slid crime scene photos across the table. Laura's Toyota Corolla, the folded apron, the abandoned dirt road. 25 years, Anthony. 25 years her mother has been wondering what happened to her daughter. For the first time, Ward's composure cracked. His hands trembled slightly. His eyes flicked to the photographs. "You want to tell me what happened that night?" Ward was quiet for so long that Webb began to wonder if he'd ever speak. But when he finally opened his mouth, the words came out in a rush, like a dam breaking after decades of pressure. "I didn't mean for it to happen." Webb kept his expression neutral. "What didn't you mean to happen, Anthony?" I saw her leaving the diner. She was alone. It was late. I'd been drinking." "You followed her to her car?" "I wasn't thinking straight. I just wanted to talk to her. She was pretty, you know? Always nice to me when I came into the diner." Webb knew this was the moment that would make or break the case. "What happened when you approached her?" Ward's voice became barely a whisper. "She got scared, started screaming. I panicked. I didn't want anyone to hear, so I—" He stopped, unable to continue. "You what, Anthony?" "I grabbed her. Covered her mouth. She fought me, tried to get away. That's when my shirt tore." The piece of fabric, the evidence that had cracked the case wide open. "Where did you take her, Anthony?" Ward broke down completely then, sobbing like a man who'd been carrying the weight of murder for a quarter-century. "There's a place in the woods off Highway 121, about 30 miles north of town. I made her drive there. I kept telling her I wasn't going to hurt her, but she kept crying, kept begging me to let her go." "And then what happened?" "She tried to run, got maybe 20 yards before I caught her. She hit her head on a rock when she fell, hard. There was so much blood." Webb felt his stomach turn, but he kept his voice steady. "Was she still alive?" "Barely. She was unconscious, breathing real shallow. I knew if I called for help I'd go to prison. I'd already been arrested twice that year. I couldn't go back to jail." "So you let her die?" Ward nodded, tears streaming down his face. "I buried her right there in the woods, drove her car back toward town and left it on that dirt road. Thought maybe people would think she ran away or got picked up by a stranger." "You folded her apron." "I don't know why I did that. I guess I felt bad about what happened. She seemed like a nice girl." The confession continued for another 2 hours. Ward led investigators to the exact location where he'd buried Laura's remains. After 25 years, there wasn't much left, but it was enough. Dental records confirmed what everyone already knew. Laura Bennett was finally coming home. If you think this case is chilling, wait until you read the ones too disturbing for YouTube. I put 7 of them in my book Too Disturbing for YouTube, 7 Shocking Murder Stories. You can grab a copy today for less than the price of a coffee. Links in the description. Don't miss out. The news of Ward's arrest and confession spread through Gainesville like wildfire. After 25 years of speculation, theories, and unanswered questions, the community finally had the truth. And the truth was uglier than anyone had imagined. Sandra Bennett was 68 years old when Detective Webb called her with the news. She'd been waiting for that phone call for 25 years, 4 months, and 23 days. But when it finally came, she wasn't sure she was ready to hear what he had to say. "Mrs. Bennett, this is Detective Webb with the Gainesville Police Department. I need you to sit down. I have news about Laura." Sandra had imagined this moment thousands of times. Sometimes she pictured Laura walking through her front door, older but alive. Sometimes she imagined a phone call telling her that Laura's body had been found, that there would finally be closure. She had never imagined it would take 25 years and a scrap of fabric to learn that her daughter had been murdered by a man who used to eat at the diner where Laura worked. The funeral was held on a sunny Tuesday in April 2023. Hundreds of people attended, including many who had never met Laura but had followed her story for decades. Sandra gave a eulogy that was both heartbreaking and defiant. "My daughter was 19 years old when Anthony Ward took her life," she said, her voice steady despite her tears. "She was working hard, chasing her dreams, trying to build a future. She didn't deserve what happened to her. But today, finally, she's at peace. And Anthony Ward will spend the rest of his life in prison, which is exactly where he belongs." Ward pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. At 62 years old, it was effectively a death sentence. He would die behind bars just as Laura had died in those woods 25 years earlier. The case sparked renewed interest in other cold cases throughout Florida. The Laura Bennett investigation became a model for how overlooked evidence could be re-examined with modern technology. Police departments across the state began reviewing their oldest unsolved cases, looking for similar pieces of evidence that might have been dismissed decades earlier. Detective Webb received commendations for his work on the case, but he was the first to admit that the breakthrough came down to luck as much as skill. "That piece of fabric could have been thrown away years ago during any number of evidence room cleanings," he said in an interview. "Laura's case was solved by persistence, modern technology, and honestly a lot of luck. Not every family gets the closure that Sandra Bennett finally received. I've also built an exclusive true crime community where we discuss cases that never make the news, with behind-the-scenes details I can't share here. Join us. Link is in the description. Don't just watch, become part of something bigger." The Laura Bennett case raises uncomfortable questions about justice, closure, and the price of truth. Was justice truly served? Anthony Ward spent 25 years living as a free man, while Sandra Bennett spent those same years in agony, wondering if her daughter was dead or alive. He had a career, relationships, a life, all built on the foundation of murder. Laura never got to finish college. She never fell in love, never got married, never had children. She never got to pursue the dreams that motivated her to work double shifts at a small-town diner. Her life was cut short at 19 by a man who couldn't accept that she didn't want to talk to him. And yet there's something powerful about the way Laura's case was finally solved. A single thread, overlooked for decades, brought down her killer. Evidence doesn't lie, doesn't forget, doesn't give up. Sometimes justice moves slowly, but it moves. Sandra Bennett now volunteers with other families dealing with missing persons cases. She knows firsthand the agony of not knowing, the desperation of wondering if today will be the day answers finally come. "I wouldn't wish what I went through on anyone," she says, "but I also wouldn't give up the fight." Laura deserved justice, and she got it, even if it took 25 years. Every missing person deserves that same persistence, that same determination to never give up. And if you've ever wondered what drives killers to do what they do, my second book, The Killer's Mind, The Psychology Behind Murders, reveals their darkest thoughts. Don't wait. These insights could change how you see every case. It's linked below. The woods where Laura Bennett died are still there, 30 miles north of Gainesville, off Highway 121. There's no marker, no memorial, nothing to indicate that a 19-year-old girl's life ended there on a summer night in 1998. But the truth is finally known. Anthony Ward's secret died with his confession. Laura's family has closure, and somewhere in an evidence room, other cold cases wait for their own Detective Webb to take a closer look, to ask the right questions, to find the overlooked clue that changes everything. Because the most important lesson from Laura Bennett's case isn't about DNA or forensic science or police procedures. It's about persistence. It's about never giving up on the victims, never letting their stories fade into obscurity, never accepting that some cases are just unsolvable. Laura's case was solved by a detective who cared enough to look closer, by technology that could extract truth from a scrap of fabric, and by a mother who never stopped believing her daughter deserved justice. Do you believe true justice was served here? Or was 25 years too late? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. And remember, cases like Laura's only stay alive when people care enough to share their stories. Subscribe so we can keep bringing light to the stories that should never be forgotten. Because somewhere out there, another family is waiting for their phone call, their breakthrough, their moment when a forgotten piece of evidence finally reveals the truth. Justice may be delayed, but it doesn't have to be denied. Not if we refuse to let these stories die.